the city of brotherly love. And for the Eagles, it certainly was that way in 2022 because entering this past season, they had a boatload of new additions, but the big question mark was whether or not Jalen Hurts, their third-year quarterback, could improve after a middle-of-the-pack 2021. Sure, they made the playoffs, but they were winless against actual playoff teams. And they got their butt whooped by Tom Brady and the Bucs in that wild card game. So the Eagles actually took initiative to improve themselves in the offseason and make those new additions that I just mentioned. And as a result, Jalen Hurts took a massive leap in 2022. He played like an MVP that, honestly, if you could make a case that maybe he should have won it over Patrick Mahomes. So anyway, I digress. He had an MVP-like year. He led a well-balanced team to the NFC's top seed, despite the team losing him for like one or two games. And they easily dispatched of their playoff competition, although an asterisk on that second game in the NFC title game. Asterisk, guaranteed. But nonetheless, they made their first Super Bowl appearance since 2017. We all know that special game against the New England Patriots with Nick Foles. But yeah, they're going to Super Bowl 57 against another dynamic team in the Kansas City Chiefs. And Jalen Hurts in that game was actually pretty damn good. The Kansas City Chiefs defense couldn't contain Hurts for much of that game. But neither could the Philadelphia defense against Patrick Mahomes in the second half. And yeah, in that back and forth affair, Philadelphia just came up short in Super Bowl 57 against Mahomes and the Chiefs. So for the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously the big goal is to get back there, to go back to the Super Bowl. This time it's in Vegas, and this time win it all. So obviously that was easier said than done because considering how much you spent in the offseason, you didn't have too much money to spend. And there are going to be a couple of players that are either going to try to resign or they're going to go somewhere else. But in terms of what I thought the team needed during that offseason, they needed to find like a defensive tackle. They needed to find an interior defensive lineman because, again, like I said, they were going to lose at least one of them. They also needed to find a new starting safety because, like I said, they're bound to lose one of their biggest ones. And looking at some of their key offseason moves for the Philadelphia Eagles, they re-signed quarterback Jalen Hurts to a large, big, fat extension. Yeah. Probably not even bigger than Patrick Mahomes, but I don't know. I digress. What were the numbers? But either way, they re-signed Jalen Hurts to a big, fat contract. They also re-signed the likes of corner James Bradbury, defensive tackle Fletcher Cox, edge rusher Brandon Graham. So two big pieces in that defensive line already locked in. They also got back Jason Kelce after he initially teased retirement, and then running back Boston Scott. And they certainly will need Boston Scott because, well, the next guy I'm going to get into, they certainly lost him. Miles Sanders. They lost Miles Sanders to the Carolina Panthers, getting a decent deal. So a big part of that offense is gone with that three-headed running attack from the Eagles. And then perhaps another big move that the Eagles lost on was both their coordinators from the team. So they took head coaching jobs. Offensive coordinator Shane Steichen went to become the Indianapolis Colts' new head coach. And then Jonathan Gannon, their defensive coordinator, took on the new role of being the Cardinals' head coach. So I totally forgot who was their new coordinators, but either way, their new coordinators are going to have a tall task of trying to replace these two coordinators that have done pretty well for themselves, that have not only set up head coaching gigs for themselves, but that has made this Eagles team so well balanced, so dynamic on their way to the Super Bowl. And perhaps the most surprising move in the Eagles free agency departures was safety CJ Gardner-Johnson, and he pretty much took a 1-year prove-it deal. That was a little bit surprising to me. Perhaps the money the money wasn't there in Philadelphia. So he decided to go to Detroit. I don't know. Maybe it was a schematic fix. I don't know. But it was a little surprising that CJ Gardner-Johnson didn't stay on with the Eagles because he was like a big part of their secondary. And now he decided to go to Detroit to help them out. I mean, I say it's a bad move, but it's just kind of weird. And then they also lost a huge part of that defensive line in Javon Hargrave to the 49ers. Yeah, the team that they beat in the NFC title game. They also lost offensive lineman Andre Dillard to the Tennessee Titans. A couple more other pieces on their defense. TJ Edwards to the Bears at linebacker. Also at linebacker, Kaiser White to the Arizona Cardinals. And then their other safety, Marcus Epps to the Raiders. But I say losing CJ Gardner-Johnson is going to be big for them. Who they did add, however, was I don't think it's going to offset however much they lost on defense. And I'd say offense in general. They added the likes of Rashad Penny from the Seahawks, so at running back, corner Greedy Williams from the Cleveland Browns, and then safety Justin Evans from the New Orleans Saints. They also added backup quarterback Marcus Mariota from the Atlanta Falcons because Gardner Minshew, their backup, went to the Colts along with Shane Steichen. But I will admit they did well for themselves in the draft because they added a defensive tackle, Jalen Carter from Georgia, to replace Javon Hargrave. And Jalen Carter looks pretty good for himself. And then they got themselves linebacker Nolan Smith from Georgia. And considering that the Cowboys didn't pick him, the Eagles were gifted Nolan Smith. And he looks pretty damn good. So, yeah, the Cowboys are seriously going to regret that one. They also got offensive lineman by the name of Tyler Steen from Alabama. So definitely helps when the Eagles' offensive line was pretty good in 2022. They also got a safety by the name of Sidney Brown from Illinois. So a potential replacement for Gardner-Johnson or Marcus Epps. And then corner Kelly Ringo from Georgia. So when you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team going into 2023, they obviously lost a lot of big players. And, they did their best to try to replace them in the draft because that's where they mainly tried to replace them to. But, I honestly don't expect them to try to replicate the defensive success that they had in 2022 because, it's just not, I wouldn't say it's attainable. I don't think it's as attainable. Maybe on the defensive line, maybe they can mask the weakness that was present in the secondary. But I imagine, yeah, it might not be as attainable of the success, especially in the passing defense, because that passing defense was just torched in the Super Bowl when you think about it. I will say the defensive line, though, is going to be their biggest strength because, like I said, you already have Fletcher Cox, you already have Brandon Graham, you have Josh Sweat, you have Hassan Reddick, and even though you lost Javon Hargrave and Robert Quinn, you got Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the rotation there too. So that's a strong D-line rotation there. So you can't be too mad at that. But still, I will say, if they can't get to the quarterback, though, that secondary is going to look pretty suspect with just Darius Slay and James Bradbury there. Because what about the middle with the safety position? You have questions there. You really have questions there with CJ Gardner-Johnson gone. And then the running game, I have questions about that too. No, there's no more Miles Sanders. You're replacing him with Rashad Penny unless Boston Scott's going to be the lead back. And, last season, even though the Eagles relied heavily on Jalen Hurts' scrambling ability, so you basically had like a four-headed dragon, opposing teams are going to do their damnedest to shut Jalen Hurts' running ability down for as much as they can. So Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny are going to really have to step it up now that Miles Sanders is in Carolina. So looking at some of their potential key games of 2023, you start on the road against New England and the Patriots. And sure, Foxborough, Gillette Stadium's not as intimidating as it once was after Tom Brady retired. Tom Brady left to go to Tampa. But hey, you can never underestimate Bill Belichick in the Patriots for as bad as they were in 2022. And then you go back home on a very short week to play the Minnesota Vikings in primetime yet again. But this time on Prime Video, pal. Yeah. Oh my God. Fuck Prime Video, by the way. And then you have a very grueling late season stretch. Weeks 11 to 14. You got a gauntlet right here. You go to Kansas City to play the Chiefs in a Super Bowl rematch on Monday night. Oof. And then a couple days later, you get a home slate with the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, and then whoever's at quarterback, you still got to play a strong 49ers team. And then you go on the road. You start a 2-game road slate, but then that big road slate includes the Dallas Cowboys in prime time. Oof. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Eagles handle that road slate, see where they're at. And that leads into my big questions going for Philadelphia as they try to defend their NFC crown and try to make it back to the Super Bowl. Can they avoid the dreaded Super Bowl curse that faces each and every Super Bowl loser? So the last two teams that have lost the Super Bowl, which was the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 55 and the Cincinnati Bengals in Super Bowl 56, they had their early struggles, especially considering Mahomes. He looked pretty iffy. And then he turned it around. And, Joe Burrow did too. And then he went on that 8 to 9 game winning streak going to the AFC Championship game. So both of these teams made it to as far as the conference finals in the NFL. I think the Eagles will have their struggles for sure, but they got to make sure their team doesn't regress severely or suffer any major injuries, especially to their quarterback, Jalen Hurts. They cannot afford a big injury. Otherwise, their season's going to go. Because this team is talented. Like, I'm willing to admit it. This team is definitely talented. But they got to avoid any bad luck, especially considering they can take full advantage of this very weak NFC. So, also, where's the rushing production going to come from? Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, somebody else. Because certainly can't be Jalen Hurts all day long. Don't make it a Josh Allen situation in Philadelphia. So the Eagles lost a good amount of their players throughout the offseason, along with both of their coordinators. But I do think they're talented enough to trample a very weak NFC. I think they're still going to be formidable opponents on their schedule. Of course, they'll have their own self-challenges. But I still think it's going to be possible for the Eagles to potentially pull off their redemption arc. It's entirely possible that they do that. It's also entirely possible that 2 months before WrestleMania 40 comes to their place in Philadelphia, that they finish the story before maybe, who knows, Cody Rhodes or Jey Uso or Liv Morgan or somebody else down in Lincoln Financial Field finishes their story. The Eagles finish their story in Vegas and wins the Super Bowl. Who knows? Either way, as long as the Eagles don't run into any bad luck, they don't suffer any major injuries, they play just as well as they did in 2022 going into Arizona. I think they'll be just fine. They can dominate like they did in 2022, and potentially win the NFC East yet again, and maybe even the NFC, and make another run at the Super Bowl. There could be a little bit of regression, but not too much. Maybe 12-5 to keep it safe. But like I said, the Philadelphia Eagles have a very good chance to get back to that big stage, and maybe finish their story 2 months before another story is written at WrestleMania 40.